On this edition of Sightings, this California Victorian was so haunted, the new owners never made it through the first night.
I heard the footsteps, I heard the jiggling of the door handle again, and I told my husband, Scott, I said, that's it. I'm out of here.
Their last hope is an ancient Chinese ritual known as feng shui. Can the power of prayer actually save a child's life?
Over 2,200 people during that first week were involved in the prayer network.
Later, every month for the past year, people in Brazil witnessed the same mysterious objects in the sky.
It was a pulsing moon, blue, and then it became an intense green, turning around, pulsating.
But is it a UFO or religious miracle? And dramatic new evidence that Bigfoot lives in Ohio.
Welcome to Sightings. I'm Tim White. After a series of perplexing encounters with a ghostly entity inside their home, one family in Northern California reached out to professionals for answers. In addition to contacting a psychic investigator, they've also looked to the Far East and will participate in a secret ceremony designed to expel the ghosts from their haunted house. Carla Wall reports.
A Victorian home trapped in time, a reminder of another era, and the gruesome murder of a young wife and the husband who turned the gun on himself. And even though the town's most notorious crime happened 60 years ago, there are still eerie echoes of the past.
I heard the footsteps, I heard the jiggling of the door handle again, and I told my husband, Scott, I said, that's it. I'm out of here.
The house is in Pinole, California, on the shores of San Francisco Bay. The people here work hard to preserve their town's Victorian charm. And that was what Bruce Marshall and his family wanted to do when they moved into this 100-year-old home in 1975. But the Marshalls soon discovered that not every reminder of the past was worthy of preservation. There was a strange, otherworldly presence no one could explain.
Like someone was watching me while I was taking my bath.
The only place that I myself felt anything different was here in the basement.
The voice seemed to be coming from the kitchen.
I didn't really talk about it until my neighbor across the street was telling me what had happened here.
Despite the home's notoriety, the Marshall kids loved the old place, so much so that Bruce's son Scott bought it back after his dad sold it. But Scott's wife Kelly doesn't share her husband's enthusiasm for the house. She's terrified of the place.
Kelly, what is it that you feel down here in the basement?
It's like a presence, like you can feel like somebody's watching you. I could just feel somebody standing behind me, but they're not there. And then when I looked up, I was afraid to look in the reflection of the window because I thought, you know, when I pulled my head up, that I would see the reflection of the person standing behind me.
Kelly refused to move into the home, and so Bruce Marshall is living here again with his dog Lucy, watching over the place until something or someone can spring the trap and release the entity here.
Do you believe in ghosts?
No. I don't know if it's not a ghost. It's something's here, but I don't know what it is.
When you sold the house to your son, right?
Right.
Kelly wouldn't have anything to do with it. She's scared of it, right?
Kelly's never stayed here. She tried to stay one night, and about halfway through the evening, she went home.
Kelly was convinced that the feelings of uneasiness she experienced in the home were connected to the murder-suicide that shattered the town so long ago.
Where did it happen? What were the circumstances?
Well, from the newspaper reports, they say that it was over financial woes. It happened in 1935. The husband came home and he shot his wife. Shot her in the back of the head twice.
Kelly, unwilling to be defeated by the entity, searched for a way to rid the house of its negative energy. She contacted local psychic Susan Stewart. A Sightings investigative team accompanied Stewart as she walked the house and tried to pinpoint the source of the haunting activity.
I was going to ask you, you've now got a psychic coming in, and you've got a feng shui master coming in. Why now? Because I have 2 small children, and my father-in-law is living back here in the house, and I'd like them to be able to come spend the night with Grandpa and play with Lucy and do the things that kids should do when they're kids. But I just don't want them here until I know and I feel safe that the house is cleared.
Stewart was aware that there had been a murder in this house, but she did not know any of the details of the case, nor did she have information about structural changes that had been made since the 1935 crime.
I feel at this point as though I'm the male energy, this man who's been drinking and falling against the wall, and I'm very angry, and
You're talking like someone who's staggering drunk
right
downstairs?
Right, falling, and I'm angry, and this particular place has a lot of very negative energy in it. I feel chills and cold, and I'm being, I feel like I'm a female and I'm being dragged by my hair and hit.
Stewart's psychic impressions of a drunken, enraged husband hitting his wife in the back of the head were corroborated in obscure newspaper accounts. And according to Stewart, it's the distraught husband who's trapped here.
Is there a presence still here? And do you feel it?
I feel as though the woman, the wife, I feel she's gone through to the light, and I think that she did that right away. I feel because he felt that he had committed this crime, and because he also killed himself afterwards, and because of his religious beliefs, felt that he couldn't go anywhere positive.
Kelly Marshall believes that Susan Stewart's psychic vision is correct, that it's the ghost of the murderous husband who must be encouraged to move on. Kelly has chosen the ancient practice of feng shui to rid the old home of its negative energy. It's based on the ancient Chinese belief in qi, the essential life force that flows through everything. When the qi is blocked, feng shui masters are called in to suggest alterations to the environment and to perform centuries-old rituals that are believed to reignite the positive flow of qi.
And I'm mixing this with the rice and cinnabar powder to drive away negative energy.
This feng shui ceremony is sacred and is usually performed in secrecy. But feng shui practitioner Lin Ho-Tu has given Sightings permission to videotape part of the cleansing ritual, including the sacred chants that are used to dispel evil spirits and return the positive qi. Ho-Tu has brought many of her students from the Young Lin Temple in Berkeley, California, to teach them the ritual and to increase its power.
As I scatter rice, first you scatter it with your palms facing up to the sky as if you are feeding and requesting the wandering spirit to leave this location, to leave this site.
The feng shui cleansing lasts for 24 hours, and once completed, Lin Ho-Tu believes she and her students have been successful.
Then perhaps you can explain to Kelly what you have now done for her house.
We're not Ghostbusters. We are here to hopefully help the spirit finding the right place, a happier place to find a better life, to be reborn quickly into a better life.
I thought when I started this whole thing that I would be afraid, and I was never afraid. I feel sadness for the people, but I also feel happiness, and I release. I'm very, very grateful.
After the ritual cleansing, Lin Ho-Tu spent time with the entire Marshall family, explaining what they must do to keep the positive qi flowing through the house. and to keep the spirits at bay.
I really believe that it did work. I would stay here. I mean, I don't come down the basement. I came down the basement by myself today.
You've almost certainly seen the power of feng shui at work and didn't even know it. Have you ever noticed that nearly every Chinese restaurant has a fish tank? Well, it's not just for decoration, but because moving water, according to feng shui beliefs, will bring prosperity, luck, and happiness.
Next, new scientific evidence that supports the power of prayer. Later, why these spots are America's most sacred sites.
Recently, in Cambridge, Massachusetts, more than 800 doctors, nurses, and clinicians attended a groundbreaking conference titled Spirituality and Healing in Medicine. Some were religious, others quite secular, but they found common ground in their shared belief that prayer can and does heal the sick. It was a remarkable declaration, made even more so by the conference's sponsor, Harvard Medical School. The Harvard conferees heard reports of life and death situations in which the power of prayer seemed to directly influence recovery, like the case of Deirdre Callahan.
Within about 2 hours of arrival there, she was diagnosed with Reye's syndrome. And I knew that Reye's syndrome was one of the leading killer diseases of children under 12, and Deirdre was 10 at the time.
In 1991, Deirdre Callahan was suddenly stricken with Reye's syndrome, a devastating neurological disorder characterized by enlargement of the liver and swelling of the brain. It is often fatal.
It was as if my heart had just fallen through my chest down into the floor. I couldn't think of anything else. I just knew that it was a killer disease and that she might die.
For 4 days, Deirdre lay in a level 4 coma, very close to death. Her parents, Kathy and Tino, were told to prepare for the worst. Attending physician Dr. Lillian Gonzalez-Pardo held out little hope.
With the coma state that she was in, I was sharing the same pessimistic outlook, because I have seen Reye's syndrome at different stages in my 20-year career, and I have seen patients die.
That evening, they asked our minister, Reverend Mary Omwake, to prepare us for Deirdre's death.
But Kathy and Tino were not ready to accept defeat. As their daughter's life hung in the balance, they began to contact prayer groups around the country, whose members devote special prayers to those in need. One of the groups that Kathy contacted is called Glad Helpers.
When she called, I took the name of her daughter and, of course, got the address, and we immediately put her on emergency.
Monthly, Glad Helpers publishes a list of thousands of people the group believes can be helped through the power of prayer. Every Wednesday, the group meets to meditate and pray. And Glad Helpers is only one of a number of organizations offering this gift of prayer to families in need.
There were all in all about 16 actual church-affiliated congregations praying for Deirdre by the end of that week. And we estimate that there were about over 2,200 people during that first week who were involved in the prayer network.
At the same time, Tino, a Native American of the Laguna Pueblo, contacted his family in New Mexico. Members of the tribe came together to perform healing rituals, and Kathy's sister, Darcy, was also called to perform rites sacred to Wicca, an ancient pagan religion. And when Darcy flew in from Boston to be by her niece's side, the Wiccan congregation continued the rituals. Wicca is a nature-based religion, viewing the divine as God and Goddess. Through magical practices, meditation, and prayer, Wiccans believe they can harness the Earth's natural energy and channel it into healing circles.
It's very common in Wiccan healing circles to send energy and have it so that the person can use it in the way they need to use it. If for some reason it was Deirdre's time to go, then the energy would have been to make her passing easier. But if it was not her time, and if it was still right for her to stay here, then she would use the energy to heal. I think they all united in the spirit of love, and through that love offered their prayers for one simple purpose, which was to heal a little girl in need.
As precious hours slipped by, Kathy and Tino worked to build an invisible shield of prayer that extended nationwide and included people of many different faiths. It was then that Deirdre believes she began to see a light.
I was in God's house. It wasn't a physical house. It was, the surrounding was kind of a pinkish white color. And I remember seeing entities or souls or beings there and angels. They had more of a glow to them. They were more elongated. The only thing I could really say were their eyes. It was just like a light on the body.
But Deirdre was still locked inside a physical body that could not communicate this sense of healing. But 2 days later, a breakthrough.
Dr. Pardo, she came to tell us Wednesday afternoon that they had detected a pupil response. And this was the first time in 5 days that they had any sign or any type of improvement.
Following day, she started to open her eyes and look around.
And I was able to look into her eyes for the first time.
And she could follow through with what we call simple commands, like squeeze my hand or point to your mom, that kind of thing. That is good brain function when you start seeing those things.
When I woke up at the hospital, I thought it was a dream. I remember strangers coming in and saying, "It's a miracle, we prayed for you." And so I was pinching myself along my arms to try to wake myself up. And then finally I came to realize and accept that it wasn't a dream. It was real.
Deirdre emerged from her coma without any sign of the brain damage her physicians had expected when and if she did survive.
I called her the miracle child because the chance for recovery was small given her clinical condition.
Dr. Herbert Benson is a Harvard Medical School associate professor and founding president of the Mind-Body Medical Institute of Boston. Dr. Benson, an acknowledged pioneer in behavioral medicine, believes that prayer does have extraordinary healing powers, which have been demonstrated in clinical studies.
People in an intensive care unit in San Francisco that were prayed for, but didn't know they were being prayed for, improved more rapidly with fewer complications than those who weren't prayed for.
Dr. Benson believes more controlled studies need to be done before the healing properties of prayer will be accepted as part of the medical mainstream. Until then, proof of the power of prayer lies with families like the Callahans, who believe it has worked for them, who believe that a network of concentrated meditative energy can work miracles. It's a story that is told in this book, Unseen Hands and Unknown Hearts by Kathy Callahan.
Prayer, I know, is an active agent. Prayer can be used to change anything in the physical world. Prayer is real. Prayer works.
The power of prayer in working could be ascribed to either the patient believing in the prayer or some external forces. The external forces are things that are beyond science to measure now.
Anytime, anybody prays, things happen. And I believe in it. And I knew when all these people were praying, something was going to happen. And it did.
People are learning that prayer does help, that it helps spiritually and physically, that if you pray on something, it just may come true. And the biggest lesson that I learned was that I'm never alone. God's always there, no matter what.
Dr. Herbert Benson, Associate Professor of Medicine at Harvard Medical Center and one of the Harvard Conference's organizers, strongly believes that healthcare in the future will be based on a new three-pronged approach: medicine, surgery, and spirituality.
Next, an unprecedented encounter with UFOs at the same Air Force Base where the shuttle lands. And new evidence that the Shroud of Turin is real.
Here are some of the stories Sightings is following in the news. For the first time in more than 25 years, 6 hours of provocative Air Force audio tapes have been cataloged and condensed. So now the public can finally hear for themselves what happened when a UFO appeared over one of America's largest military bases. Carla Wohl reports.
Edwards Air Force Base is one of the largest aircraft test centers in the world. The people who work here know the difference between an experimental aircraft and a meteor. But in 1965, they couldn't figure this one out.
16, you got some U-Pods. Roger. Whereabouts are they? Edwards and Victorville area.
Key excerpts from the declassified tapes have been organized into an audio documentary. I spoke with Sam Sherman, the documentary producer.
Why did you decide to do something with them?
I felt the public should know something about it. It's a subject that has been ridiculed for many years.
It was a daunting task to make sense out of hours of tape from dozens of different sources.
I took all the significant pieces of the conversations from phone patches and ground-to-air radio, base-to-base communication, and put them all together so it was like a dramatic program.
Sherman took 8 months to assemble the collection of tapes into a concise and comprehensible account of the Edwards UFO incident.
I was stunned to find out that a squadron of 12 UFOs was over Edwards and that there was an alert status and that 5 other bases were involved and NORAD was involved. It shocked me.
This is the tower in Edwards. We have an object now. Open the field. I can make out red and white flashing light.
The air traffic controller on duty that night has agreed to speak publicly about the UFO incident for the first time in 3 decades. That interview on an upcoming edition of Sightings.
In Nashville, Tennessee, medical researchers at Vanderbilt University believe that they have laid to rest the age-old myth that children get wired on sugar. Instead, it's the parent thinking the child will get wired that causes the behavior, according to Dr. Mark Woolratch, chief of the Child Development Department at Vanderbilt. His study, published in the Journal of the American Medical Association, concludes that there is no link between hyperactivity and sugar.
Well, I think what it's really saying is if you're having a problem with your child's behavior, you probably ought to look elsewhere rather than sugar as the probable cause.
One cause, according to the study, is a parent's expectation that children act differently after eating sweets. In the study, parent groups were asked to evaluate their children's behavior after the kids ate sugar. But the hyper kids had, in fact, not been given sugar. Instead, they were somehow feeding off their parents' unspoken, some say psychic, influence.
The parents who thought their children had received sugar rated their children significantly worse. And not only that, when you actually looked at their behavior, they tended to stand closer to the children and be more demanding of the children. So just the suggestion had a real potent effect on their behavior and their perceptions of what they thought was happening with their children.
At the conclusion of the Vanderbilt study, researchers found strong evidence that it is not the power of sugar, but the extraordinary power of suggestion that is creating the link between candy and chaos. In Turin, Italy, the mysterious shroud, believed by many to be the burial cloth of Jesus still bearing his likeness, will soon be put on public display for the first time in 20 years. Although some scientists have concluded through carbon dating that the Shroud of Turin is a medieval forgery, new research suggests previous carbon dating is unreliable.
This is a replica of the Shroud of Turin. Probably the most visible features are the 2 parallel burn marks that were the result of the fire that the shroud suffered in the year 1532.
John and Rebecca Jackson head up a joint Russian-American scientific investigation from the Turin Shroud Center in Colorado. And researchers in Moscow have found evidence that the 1532 fire may have tainted carbon dating results.
The fire itself, the fire alone, is able to generate such an error as 400 years.
And pollen samples from the shroud, as well as distinctive funeral markings, suggest the shroud is of Middle Eastern origin.
I with certainty can say that the man in the shroud has elements that are distinctly Jewish, and the burial customs are typically Jewish burial customs, which were in force at the time of Jesus.
Minimal age, not exact, but minimal age of the shroud is about 18 or 1700 years before present.
Age is a critical factor, but the most enduring mystery to be solved is how the human form was imprinted on the cloth, since there are no traces of paint or body fluids remaining on the shroud.
And certainly one possibility is radiation, because that can cause changes to the cloth. I am not prepared to offer any sources of or causes of that radiation. However, there's something here that is needs to be resolved one way or the other.
We'll have more stories from the news next time. Now, here's what's coming up on Sightings.
Every month in Brazil, crowds of 10,000 people gather to witness a religious miracle.
I'm here with the faith that it's something from God.
Investigators think it's a UFO. Later, a search for Bigfoot in Ohio.
Sightings has recently gained access to reports of an important new UFO flap that's been ongoing since 1994. Brilliant spherical UFOs are appearing with uncanny regularity over northeastern Brazil. We sent a Sightings team to investigate this newly discovered UFO hotspot. For more than 2 years now, the jungles of northeastern Brazil have played host to throngs of pilgrims, people who travel from all over the world to the small town of Bacharite. Here, at precisely 2 p.m. on the first Saturday of each month, UFOs appear and hover with such regularity that crowds of up to 10,000 people have witnessed the phenomenon.
It was a pulsing moon, blue, and then it became an intense green, turning around, pulsating. It's not a hallucination.
Those of us who were prepared with still and video cameras verified that there indeed were unidentified disc-shaped flying objects in the sky. That is, flying saucers. Immediately we aimed the still cameras, pointing them in that direction, and we documented the presence of 6 flying saucers.
Reginaldo Atayive is head of CPU, one of Brazil's oldest and most respected paranormal research organizations. Since 1994, CPU has gathered an impressive gallery of UFO photographs, as well as collateral data about strange physical effects generated by the monthly visitations.
On the first day of October 1994, when we photographed the UFOs, our equipment detected a very strong electromagnetic field. The static in the atmosphere increased to a frightening level, and it made the hair of those 6,000 people stand on end.
At the same time that CPU was studying the UFOs from a scientific point of view, word spread throughout Brazil that what was happening in Bacharite was a religious miracle, a modern-day appearance of the Virgin Mary.
I don't understand anything about ufology. I couldn't say I'm here with the faith that it's something from God. I felt the presence of the Lord. The only ones who don't feel it are the ones who don't have faith. The Virgin speaks to us through the sun.
Some scholars have compared UFO apparitions to apparitions of angels and saints and the Virgin Mary.
John Saliba is a professor of religious studies at the University of Detroit. He has written several papers on the various religious interpretations of the UFO phenomenon.
They come to warn us of disaster. They come to give us spiritual advice. They come to help us in our struggles here on earth. And since they are, of course, superior to us, immensely superior to us, they have a lot to teach us.
The religious overtones of the Bacharite sightings have also caught the attention of South America's leading UFO researcher and author, Irene Gronke. The sightings are remarkably similar to ones Gronke investigated more than 20 years ago in southern Brazil.
A little girl of 5 watched a UFO emitting a beam of light to the opposite side, where her mother and sisters were watching the clouds and saw Jesus Christ sitting and Our Lady. But it was a hologram. It was not the real thing.
Gronke is now working with Reginaldo Atayive and CPU on the Bacharite sightings. It is a unique cooperative effort, exploring the UFOs here from both scientific and spiritual perspectives.
The religious people were very resentful of the scientific people, and vice versa. The society I direct, which is CISNY, we study the two sides, and we are more prone to accept scientists together with mysticism.
On her most recent visit, Gronke examined new photographic evidence at CPU headquarters, and she spent several hours at the local newspaper's archives, studying the trend of press accounts.
Of course, this is very important for us ufologists when both the press and the authenticity of the photos is proved.
The following day was the first Saturday of the month, and a Sightings investigative team accompanied Brazil's preeminent ufologists to Baturité. At 2 p.m., a local religious leader announced the arrival of the Virgin Mary, and all eyes turned to the sky. Although no one on our team nor anyone in the Brazilian contingent saw any UFOs, many people in attendance were sure that they had had a supernatural vision.
It was the pupil of the Virgin Mary, from the eye of the Virgin Mary.
Based on her investigation at the site, Gronke believes that the Baturité sightings are being viewed from two angles, the scientific and metaphysical, and that like a two-way mirror, your angle determines what you will see.
I believe that throughout the ages, our extraterrestrial superior beings have been trying to teach mankind progress in ethical codes and have used the means proper to the state of preparation that they found the populaces in. They are now trying to take us a step further. That is why it's so important that Ataidi photographed what was seen in the clouds, which was not an image of Jesus Christ or our Virgin Mary, but really UFOs.
Gronke believes she understands why most people at Baturité are seeing Christian symbols and not extraterrestrial beings or spacecraft.
The reaction of the people, of the crowds that were present, was that of fervent Catholics who see these things in the church and believe they see Our Lady. That shows you that all this information they've had throughout the centuries is very well ingrained into people's subconscious.
Nearly 81, Irene Gronke hopes that she will live long enough to fulfill a childhood dream that haunts her to this day, to make contact with the extraterrestrials who've hovered so close, but so far have chosen not to land.
Next.
I can't even get a baseline to even begin to take measurements. Something is very peculiar inside this place.
The energy of sacred sites.
There are places around the world that have a strange, unearthly attraction. Stonehenge, the Great Pyramid at Giza, the Nazca Lines in Peru. And right here in the United States, there are also places, perhaps not as well known, where generation after generation return to make a spiritual connection with something beyond reason.
When we get ready to go into a mountain, we always stop at a key point place, and we'll talk to it either with our drum or through prayer or through a flute of some kind. You communicate and ask him permission to enter this home of a spiritual place.
For generations, members of the Lummi tribe of California have journeyed to Mount Baker in search of spiritual guidance and renewal.
Each time I go up there, I go up for a different reason. Sometimes I go up there and I've got a broken spirit. So I go there and I ask to heal my spirit. Sometimes I go up there to learn how to get along with people, but in order to get along with them, I have to get along with me first. It depends on what has moved me at that particular moment as to what I'm going to look for when I go there. It is a very sacred place.
Sacred sites are at the core of American Indian culture. They are the place where a nature-based religion is affirmed in practice.
Author and environmental psychologist James Swan believes that certain places in nature have a supernatural effect on the psyche.
The area that we're in right now near Mount Baker is the origin of the creation myth of the Lummies. So there's an extraordinary power that is renewed by people coming back up here to step into the footsteps of their ancestors.
There are so many things up there spiritually for all of us, not just Indian people, all people. We're all part of the Creator. And it's there for everyone to listen to get healing from.
But which came first, the legend or the location? Far to the east, in New England, there are ancient stone structures that still elicit powerful emotional responses, even though the legend of their origin is lost.
The work that I've done on sacred sites suggests that many of these structures were built on top of areas of extreme magnetic variation, extreme magnetic flux, which suggests to me that people were consciously placing them in certain spots on the Earth.
Archaeologist Sal Trento has been studying these enigmatic stone structures for more than a decade and has developed a theory to explain why they were created.
The indigenous population in this country was well aware of the heavens and the stars. The cosmology of Native Americans is intense. These people knew what was happening with the sun, with the moon, and so forth, and the suspicion is that they might have built these chambers to take advantage of what they knew regarding the stars and the sun.
Trento has found that each chamber is built along a kind of geomagnetic fault line in places where high levels of electromagnetism are concentrated. He asserts that this force of nature had a measurable effect on ancient people and their culture.
Turns out that a radical change in a total magnetic field can cause people to have altered perceptions. The reason why this happens has to do with different brain chemicals that are released, and this affects people's moods and perceptions.
A sightings team went with Trento to one of the most prominent stone chambers in New England, located in Upton, Massachusetts. Trento used a magnetometer to measure electromagnetism at the site, thought to be over 1,000 years old. The readings were bizarre.
The closer I get to the center of the chamber, the more difficult it is to stabilize these readings. I can't even get a baseline 0 point to even begin to take measurements. Something is very peculiar inside this place.
Each place has this presence or spirit to it. It's the equivalent of a church or a cathedral or shrine. It may not be something we can always measure directly with scientific variables, but it's here and you can sense it and feel it.
Earth Mysteries researcher Sig Lundgren has not only explored sacred sites all over the world, he has also felt their physical effects.
I've experienced heightened awareness of the spiritual. I've experienced the ability to think more clearly about issues that are up for me. I've experienced visions.
And Lundgren maintains that these ancient spiritual centers continue to have relevance.
In my humble opinion, most Americans are asleep, and sacred places are spaces where you can wake up. Some people call it being born again. Whatever it is, it's becoming aware that the spiritual realms are real.
I think we're at a point in both our cultural evolution and human history where the rediscovery of the sacredness or spirituality of life is critical, because we have such great power in our technology these days that we have to balance it. So the idea of going to a place that is special to you and trusting in nature and your own nature is at the core, I think, of being healthy and sane in modern society.
Lummi elder Chadaskadam Wichtalam fears for the future of Mount Baker. Although the tribe believes that no one can own this most sacred site, there are logging companies and land developers who disagree. The Lummies are concerned that centuries of peaceful worship will eventually be only a memory.
Next, Ohio farmers who've never heard of Bigfoot are staying out of the woods at night because of this.
On a recent edition of Sightings, we reported the discovery of a huge nest-like structure by a Bigfoot investigative team in rural Ohio. We also introduced you to Bigfoot researcher Matt Moneymaker, whose ongoing attempts to capture the elusive creature have yielded some extraordinary results.
The feeling was, the first time I saw a track was just, oh my God, all these stories are true.
Matt Moneymaker has been tracking Bigfoot for over a decade, most recently in eastern Ohio, where local residents claim they have spotted the creature in heavily wooded areas.
If you put a little effort into going out and checking this out, you could prove it to yourself. You could see for yourself some evidence that these legendary things existed.
Moneymaker uses sophisticated surveillance equipment in his attempts to capture the sounds and images of the legendary creature.
The purpose of a night vision scope is to be able to see in the dark without using lights, so that animals or other subjects that would be deterred by white light might walk into the frame, not even aware that they're being watched.
And Moneymaker has recently gathered some of the most compelling evidence to date, sound recordings of an unidentified creature that may one day prove to be the elusive Bigfoot.
They sound as though they're produced by a very large animal, and they're consistent with what people describe as being Bigfoot screams and Bigfoot howls.
These sounds convinced Sightings to return with Moneymaker to the site of the original recording in hopes of capturing the creature on tape, this time on videotape.
I would be very surprised if any scientist would be able to come up with a recording of a known animal that matches exactly the sounds that I've recorded at this location over the past few months.
Barely 2 hours into the Bigfoot stakeout, the team clearly heard footsteps in the woods, amplified through an extremely sensitive microphone. Moneymaker went in for a closer look, but whatever had caused the sound had vanished.
I'm not disappointed about not getting a videotape of a Bigfoot tonight, because after all, what I'm trying to do is get a videotape of the most difficult to photograph subject on the face of the earth, perhaps.
And jokes about his last name aside, Matt's not in it for the money.
What's really exciting about going out and looking for Bigfoots or investigating sightings is that you're doing something that most people are completely ignoring. It's a frontier subject that exists in a world where there really are no other frontiers.
Matt Moneymaker continues his stakeout in the same area where he recorded the moans and footsteps. Sightings will update you with any new information as the search for Bigfoot in Ohio continues.
Ghosts, UFOs, the unexplained, dramatic stories of the paranormal from the files of Sightings, a new paperback book available now wherever books are sold, from Fireside Books.
Until next time, remember, no mystery is closed to an open mind. For Sightings, I'm Tim White.
Thank you.